Yesterday, I put up a video about how Father James Martin expressed his disappointment in the tablet about how a certain term was not included in the final synthesis document. And I also pointed out how other areas in this synod were not discussed. We seem to be going to the margins and discussing different topics, but the core problems in the church are not being discussed. I just read out what Matthew Kelly put on as a comment on the video. Author Matthew Kelly, we are witnessing an epic failure around men's spirituality, and it takes courage to point that out. I don't know if I'm courageous or not. I'm just pointing out the realities here. You had a synthesis document that mentioned, and as I said, mentioned 51 times women in it, which is fine. I mean, as I said, women have as equal right to heaven as men do, and I'm sure there are a lot of them up there that will be far closer to our Lord than many men. But the synthesis document in this synod mentioned women 51 times and didn't mention men at all. And I was just reading through some of the comments, and it says, well, there's enough men in the church. Isn't the church run by men? Isn't the world run by men? So on and so on and so on and so forth. Yes, you could argue that as well. But, if you want to evangelize in the world today, you need to evangelize men. Otherwise, what you're going to face is a church that is lopsided. And we see this already. Since girls were made altar girls, we've seen how boys see it as a girl's thing to do at Mass, and kind of slowly push them out of serving at Mass. 70% of vocations used to come from men who served at Mass, but today, if there's even altar servers, most boys don't see it as something manly to do. They don't see it as something a normal man would do, is serve at Mass. If you were to ask somebody who doesn't have much love for the Catholic faith, and you ask them about the church and the priesthood, what are their first impressions about the church and the priesthood? I can tell you they will come back to you very quickly with what the media has painted the Catholic Church over the last 50 years, and the problems, especially in Ireland, paedophiles, cover up. This is what gets bandied around time and time and time again. It's a gay profession. That's what's said now. And then we've looked at, 10 years ago, we look at what happened in Maynooth. And I am not inventing this. This is all in the media. And when priests, those who are who are part of the formation team in Maynooth, voice their concerns about the culture, they get removed. And then we're wondering, well, why aren't we engaging normal men in the faith if the church is not able to get its act together and to actually form men, proper men, to carry out a mission in the church? If you look at the phenomenon which is Jordan Peterson, and you go to any of his conferences, you will see he attracts a big following of men. 70 to 80% sometimes in his conferences, you will have men that will go to hear what he has to say. And he talks into the lives of men. And when you look at the church at this moment in time, it is dreadfully painful to see how the church is not able to evangelize men, everyday men, normal men, in 2023. And we have a synod that spoke so much. There was so much publicity about LGBTQ. So much. I mean, if you were looking about so much publicity about LGBTQ and women's priests, women's ordination, women's role in the church, and so forth. Okay. You are creating a kind of a culture of a synod that people are looking at that and said, look, what is the church speaking to? Who is the church speaking to? And I have to say it, there are some incredible women in the church that are incredible evangelizers. I would think in Ireland, Sister Bríd McKenna, universally loved, universally listened to, universally respected, and a great woman. But, and her apostolate is very much focused on the priesthood, and she's a great woman to rally men. It's a gift she has. But if the church is going to ever renew, it has to speak to modern men. And it has to talk about the problems that modern men face. It's James Martin who was talking about that the church needs a better outreach because there is suicide in the LGBT community because they don't feel welcome. And maybe James Martin has a point in that area that, there should be scope to allow a ministry in the church to help people that feel shame that they didn't cause. And I can understand what he's saying. But at the same token, there are over 500 to 600 men in Ireland, and you can look across this globally, that take their life out of despair because they have no meaning. And they've never been given meaning. And they've never been given the ability to understand or cope with what they're facing. If you bring the message of the gospel into their lives, to understand that God is real, and that there is a higher power that's able to transform your life, you're going to transform their lives. And I just think it is an epic failure, as Matthew Kelly says, that the church has not addressed this failure on men's spirituality. That the synthesis document, the Irish one, certainly didn't address it. This final synodal synthesis document doesn't address these issues. So, because the majority of Catholic men are not going to be clerics, not called to be clerics. So what is the mission of a Catholic man? What should be the mission of a Catholic man? What are we created for? We're created, in essence, we're created to be fathers. How does that manifest itself in our life? How do we form each other? How do we form our kids? What about the domestic church? What about the leadership role that a man has in a family, etc.? And you can expand out of this. This discussion in the church is absent. It really is absent. And in trying to, very much move towards this idea of equality, yes, men and women are equal, but we're not the same. And in not acknowledging the differences that exist between men and women, the church is lopsided. And it is lopsided because you see the absence of men from a normal church. Young men, if you look at the sports world, the sports world isn't perfect either, but it attracts men, it captivates them, etc., etc. And yet, the faith has that ability as well, but it's not marketed. We haven't opened that up to ordinary men. Christ called ordinary men. This is what, remember, St. Peter was an ordinary man, an ordinary Jewish man of his era, an ordinary married man. If people forget this, St. Peter was an ordinary Jewish married man. He had a mother-in-law, he had a wife, he probably had children, because Christ called ordinary men. And he spoke into the lives of those ordinary men. And this is what the church needs to do today. And it needs to radically rethink seminary formation, which I think it has. I think everybody can see this because, you need proper, good formation in order to be a priest. Otherwise, your priesthood will fall over. We've seen this. And I think the Irish, that Irish experiment Its fruits have been cataclysmic for the priesthood in Ireland, for those men themselves, and it's time to rethink that, which I think the Irish that have been forced to, because the publicity has been what it is. And so, like, this is the challenge I'm going to kind of set if the church really wants to take forward this synodal process. You need a men's spirituality that's not clerical. We're not talking here about clerics and priests and religious. The everyday man. The everyday man that the likes of Jordan Peterson is able to captivate for some reason. The way he's able to deliver talks and so forth. And Bishop Barron does this very, very well as well. But, we're in Ireland for some reason, and this is why we are 15 years behind Netherlands and Belgium in being where the faith will be irrelevant to the lives of most people, because we are not able to preach the truth and give the truth to the ordinary man. So many women reach out to me. Can you help my brother? Can you help my son? Can you help my husband? So many women in the faith, and they want to bring the men in their lives to the faith, but there isn't the structures there to do it. You did have in the past, various men's fraternities and so forth. I mean, Legion of Mary used to do great things, but so many men didn't want to get involved in Legion of Mary because it's a women's organization. They felt, sadly, that they've landed in a women's organ and a very elderly. And this is no disrespect to these amazing women, but you need men to help other men in the faith. The way that you have so many women helping other women in the faith, you need men to help other men in the faith. And the Synod didn't address this at all. It doesn't address the most fundamental problems that are destroying the faith. It is that the Catholic Church is not able to engage men, certainly not in Ireland. And I speak about my own country here. Your ordinary man in his 20s in Ireland is not interested in the Catholic faith or in the church. And those that are considered strange. This is the sad reality. Any guy in his 20s who is anyway Catholic, and I mean normal Catholic. I'm not meaning extremist Catholic. I'm just meaning a normal Catholic man in his 20s who would go to Mass every Sunday and pray or have a rosary is considered strange in Ireland because he's so rare. This is where we are in 2023 Ireland, and people know this. And if you're going to evangelize, if you're going to bring the faith back into the lives of those that need it, because there are men that need the faith. There are, if our culture is driving 500 to 600 men to take their lives every year, there's something wrong with that culture. And so we can bring the message of the gospel into that culture into the lives of the men. Look, there is a higher power that can give you meaning. What you're experiencing, this darkness that you're experiencing, that's fueled by drugs and and all the vices that destroy men's lives, the gallbladder and all this. Look, you can turn your life around and see a different meaning into it, but it takes courage. It takes somebody to stand up and say, look, we need to give men in 2023 the fundament, the reality of a good, strong men's spirituality that has to start in seminaries. It has to start in religious life. It has to start in our schools, in our universities. Otherwise, any normal man in his 20s who is Catholic, loves the faith, goes to Mass, he becomes a rare thing. It is the truth. I say it, no wonder vocations are in their low 20s in Ireland. And if the church doesn't see this and understand this, you'll never be able to evangelize into the lives of real men. You won't. You simply won't. Because when you look what's on the agenda, what's being discussed in Rome, most men don't find that interesting or compelling or anything. You know, if you were to read that census document, any normal man that really doesn't understand much about the Catholic Church, just how is that connecting? What's in there for me? Is there anything that's going to connect with my life or anything like this? You know, there's nothing there. You know, and in going to the margins of the church, what we're doing now is we've forgotten about the core base of the church. That's the simple truth. That's the simple truth, and we've seen it so many times. You know, if there was more men focused on evangelizing other men in Ireland, you would give them the beautiful encounter with Christ, but you'll also give them meaning. You'll also evangelize other men in that area. And that's what we're seeing. So I am calling it out. You know, Father James Martin's favourite acronym didn't get mentioned in the Synod. Well, men's spirituality, and I'm talking about normal men that are not clerics, you know, not leadership in the church, your normal men, well, they didn't get a mention either. In the sense that, what is the church's vision for evangelizing men in 2023, especially in the countries where we see this colossal collapse in the Catholic faith? What is the church's vision for moving forward? You've seen a man abuse his power, Father Rupnik abuse his power, you know, to control other people. And what does the church do? Instead of saying to him, look, Father Rupnik, do you know what? You better just be quiet, go away, and you're laicized, and you know what? Just live a life of prayer and keep your head down. And that's what the Pope and the Jesuits and the Curia could have done. Keep him out of the media. Instead, no, he has to go and get incarnated and continue practicing his priestly ministry. You couldn't invent this in 2023. And people are looking. This is the type of publicity that gets blown up across the church. And then the Pope has to show face and change the statutes of limitations to allow an investigation. And the women that were abused, they waived their anonymity, and now we're hearing all of this coming out. Does the church not understand, you know, that this is no way ever going to engage people in the way that we're treating these cases? And it has to draw a line in the sand. And it's just say, look, if you know, there has to be good discipline in the church. You know, there has to be good discipline. And if there is not going to be good discipline, you're going to spend we all know this. You know, an army would not stand if it didn't have discipline. And the church, the men in the church won't stand if you don't have good discipline. And, you know, I'm sorry, you know, it's sometimes you have to be disciplined and to show that there are consequences to actions, you know. Anyway, I just thought I put this message out because I know it resonated. I know that that video resonated. I got tons of comments. It went, you know, it drove a lot of discussion. So I want to bring that discussion to priests and bishops. You know, your marketing message in the Synod failed, epic failure for talking to your ordinary man in the pew. Your ordinary man that's not in the pew. There is nothing there. There's nothing in that Synod that is going to bring your ordinary man on the street into the church, or engage the ordinary man on the street with the faith. You know, your ordinary 20-year-old man, how are you going to engage in this world in 2023 with the ordinary man on the street, looking at what was on the agenda in the Synod? You know, and I'm just saying this. You know, maybe if the Pope had during the Synod had bought a football team, a male football team to the Vatican, you know, that probably would have engaged. But you know, they brought New Ways ministry. Okay, that's okay. Do you understand? So this is the challenge that the church needs to look at. if it's ever going to move forward, is a spirituality for men. And I say this, men, normal men that are not clerics, that are not in leadership. How do you speak into their lives? In the same way, when you look at the the massive conferences that Jordan Peterson, I remember 3 Arena was packed in Ireland, and you look around, there was 70% men, a lot of young men. How was he able to speak into their lives? Why isn't the church able to do the same? Bishop Robert Barron, he is doing that in a sense. He is. Why are there so few people able to do that, with that ability to speak into people's lives, especially men's lives? You look around, you ever go to traditional Latin Mass in Ireland, you always see more men than women at that Mass. Why does that liturgy attract more men? Always. And young men. We saw it in France. Went to Mass in one evening in France, and there was a lot more men at the Mass, and a lot of them were young men. Why does that liturgy attract? Just throwing this out there. So, maybe on the next agenda in the Synod on synodality, there will be a paragraph on men's spirituality, tackling the problems that stop men engaging in the faith, tackling the problems of men abandoning their responsibility to be fathers, tackling the problems of families without fatherhood. What is the purpose of a man? What is the purpose of a father? How can we form men better in the faith? How can we form men better to understand the barriers that block them from progressing in the spiritual life, etc., etc., etc. So that you can give the hacks of life, the spiritual hacks of life as such, for men to be better men, to be better fathers. And that spirituality has to be drawn out in the church. You can have a whole synod on this, and I know do you know what? I would say more women would support this than men. What this video that I'm saying, I would say there are mothers, sisters, daughters, women that that care about their men, that said, look, the faith that they love, how can we give it? How can we show you how much we love our faith? And that's really where I'm going. And we'll see where this kicks off. But I do think it's an epic failure for the church. It's an epic failure for the synodal process. And it's an epic failure for men not to voice this and to show it. Okay, yes, the church might be dominated by men in the sense that it is hierarchical. It is, and this is how our Lord set up the church. On this rock, you are Peter, and on this rock I shall build my church. And we have apostolic succession. But the men have really let themselves down. The clerics, some bishops have really let themselves down, and we've seen this played out in some of the scandals that have happened in the church. We saw it in Poland, where recently a bishop had to step down because the men had a gay sex party, and this male prostitute was left unconscious, and they didn't want to let paramedics in. I mean, guys, and what message does that send to other men about what is happening in seminaries, in religious houses? And I know it's not, because I was in the seminary, that wasn't my experience, but I know that's not the norm. But that's a culture that creeps in at some places. And when that culture gets so permeated into some, which it did in Ireland, it did in the UK in some places. When that culture gets permeated, we see it with Cardinal Keith in Scotland. We've seen it in the Vatican. We've seen it in Rome. When that culture permeates in, those men in that culture are a cancer in the church that stops the gospel from being preached. It is very sad. You need authenticity. You need real real authenticity in the priesthood in order to preach the gospel. And that's why Christ spoke into the lives of real men, normal men, everyday men at that time to found his church. And in a way, the church needs to rethink, its formation and how it deals with these problems. But it also needs to speak into the lives of ordinary men today. And it's not doing that. It's an epic failure. And unless the church is able to do that, it will hobble on for years to come. It will become an old men's club, an old women's club that is irrelevant to the lives of ordinary people. Ordinary men. If you're able to fill a stadium to look at football, why would you not be able to for religion? Because once you captivate men with the reality of the faith, this incredible encounter with Christ, who does transform our lives, who does give meaning, it will show, but this is serious. And the church is not taking the gospel message serious enough. It isn't. Let's see. Let me know what you think in the comments. I love the discussion in the last video. It really got me thinking. Let me know what you think in the comments. But I think it is an epic failure that the church has not called men seriously with a serious men's spirituality in today's world. Because it's amazing. It's amazing. You see it played out in other sectors, and it's in the likes of Jordan Peterson and others. The church will say to in its catechism that pornography is a sin. And yet you see in the totally secular side that there's nothing religious. You see this whole movement against pornography directed towards men. It's and yet men will will engage and listen to that side, but the church is not able to preach and teach that message into the lives of ordinary men, ordinary teenagers. It's an interesting time, but I really do challenge the church on this. I really do challenge the church. It's time to get your act together, and it's time to target men with a men's spirituality that speaks to men, with a liturgy that speaks to men, in the sense that and in a priestly formation that speaks to real men. That might start engaging people more in the faith. And if a man is engaged in the faith statistically, and this is true, then the family would be more engaged in the faith. And so it's all played out here, and we would have less problems in our families, in our society. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. God bless you. Take care. Bye bye.